Summer is fast approaching, and I think it's time we took a little bit of stress out of our lives, isn't it? With HelloFresh UK, you can get all the ingredients and inspiration you need to make your meal times and your cooking experience simpler than ever. HelloFresh provides a number of recipes and meals to make your life as easy as possible and also caters to a wide range of different dietary requirements. Use my special discount to get 50% off your first order plus 35% off the next three and three free gifts as well. What more could you ask for? Check out the discount link or the checkout code down in the description below. Time to complete a hectic 4-day run of playoff predictions here on the podcast as we turn our attention to League 2 and the playoff semi-final first legs. We've had the League 1 predictions, we've had the Championship predictions, we've even had the National League playoff final predictions. All of those are up in the eye above. But today we focus on the 4 teams who will be looking to join Leyton Orient, Stevenage and Northampton Town in League 1 next season. There's some pretty interesting stories in this playoff mix as well. In the end, Mansfield did just miss out at the expense of Stockport County, Carlisle United, Bradford City and Salford City. It was a nervy final day for the bottom 2 of those though. And we now focus on the big semi-finals that take place on Saturday night and Sunday evening. Who put a game at Sunday at 7 o'clock as well? Not fair on the fans, that one. But we're going to be talking about the 2 fixtures and sharing our predictions. And of course, we'll see who edges closer to Wembley in the next 2 days. We start on Saturday night with the first of the 2 semi-finals. It is Salford City versus Stockport County. A cracking game this, a relatively local one. And a real battle of styles based on these side strengths, because Stockport in these playoffs of the 4 teams are by far the best defensively over the season, whereas Salford are by far the best going forward and by far the worst at the back. So going to be a bit of a battle here. Stockport, of course, looking for back-to-back promotions following their narrow National League title win against Wrexham last year. A very good season for them. A lot of people expected them to be up there, and they will be looking to complete the job and make it to League 1. Salford, again, a very good season in League 2. But there is something interesting about this, which we'll talk about in a moment. Of course, we have to bear in mind that prior to this season, the last time these 2 had played each other competitively was in the National League North back in 2017-18. So both of these sides will look 5 years later and say, hey, things aren't going too badly, are they? But for Salford and Stockport, this leg might be decisive. The reason I say that is because Stockport are brilliant at home. They've had the 3rd best record in the league this season, only lost 3 games. For Salford, the 2nd best away record in the division. If we flip that and look at what's going on in the first leg, Salford have been poor at home, only 35 points, 14th best record in the division, and Stockport, 6th best away record, but below their league position and slightly below par. So given the fact that we know both sides are going to be playing to their strengths in the second leg and where they feel most comfortable, this leg takes on an awful lot more importance because you feel whoever does best in this one is probably going to have the upper hand. Now, if we go back to earlier in the season, Stockport managed to pick up a 2-goal win here at Salford, and it is something they'll probably be looking to replicate this time. There's a lot of experience in the squad. As we mentioned, it's one that's used to getting promoted. It did so last season, and a large part of that team is still together. And although their away record isn't as good as their home one, they've got an excellent defensive record on the road. Just 21 goals conceded, only 1 off the best record in the division. And they also score a fair amount of goals, so when they do win, they tend to by a couple of goals. Just the 4 draws on the road this season, they tend to either win or lose. And I'm going to have to stick my neck on the line for this prediction to make it right. For Salford, as we mentioned, pretty poor at home. 10 wins, but 8 defeats also. And although, of course, it's been a pretty meteoric rise with the backing of the class of 92 and all that goes with that, it's not quite got that same raucous core fan base. There are a lot of United fans that will go and support the games, but there aren't that many people there where Salford are always the first club. And when you look at Stockport by comparison, who have been stuck down in the National League North for so long and now started to come back through the divisions, there's that core fan base of that side that was in the EFL 15, 20, 25 years ago. They will be really up for this. And they're a side that have got experience at this. They started the season slowly. They have come on incredibly strong. And if we look towards the end of the season as well, unbeaten in their final 6 games, 3 clean sheets in that time, scoring all the time. And Salford, a 1-0 defeat, disappointing at home to Gillingham. It's fair to say they limped over the line into the playoffs, but prior to that, 4 wins in 5, 3 of them by 3-2, all of those away from home. Might give you a clue what I'm going for in the second leg. But for now, Stockport away from home, I have to back them. They played Orient off the park the other week with a 3-0 win down at Brisbane Road. They got a good point at Carlisle prior to that, and they've looked incredibly good this second half of the year. I do feel that Stockport are the favourites for the away leg. I don't think that means tie over, because you can't say that with Salford's away record. They have scored far more than anyone else away from home. In the second leg, that might be crucial. But for me, I look at this and say Stockport have to get a lead. A bit like I did with Luton with their away record for the Championship one. I feel if Stockport aren't ahead after the first leg, it could be a very disappointing week for them. It's a little bit of a different dynamic with the playoffs in League 2, because unlike the Championship and League 1 where they're pretty close together, we've got a whole week off essentially for these two afterwards. They come back to the reverse fixture at lunchtime next Saturday. Will that make a difference? One game under the lights, one game at lunchtime? I'm not too sure. But I'm going for Stockport to win away from home. I think it will be a fairly comfortable game. I'm going to actually go for a slightly similar game to what we saw in a league fixture at this ground. I'm going to go for Stockport to win it, but instead of 2-0, I'm going to go for 3-1, because at the moment, the way they've come into these playoffs and the way they've played later in the season, I do feel they're the favourites for it. But Salford will be looking to spoil the party. 3-1 for Stockport away from home, and then we'll see if Salford can replicate their great away league form. Let's move on to the second game, which is taking place inexplicably on Sunday evening. It is Bradford City versus Carlisle. Two good sides. Of course, Bradford have been this sleeping giant in League 2 for a long time, stuck there with a huge fan base, consistently underachieving. But this time they are in that top 7 and they've got a chance. Mark Hughes in charge, a manager that's seen everything, has seen the big occasions, but again they limped over the line with a draw on the final day against Orient. For Carlisle, it's been a sea of draws for the last few weeks, but it's been enough for them because they've been in a pretty comfortable position prior to that. Did lose at home to Salford recently, but lots of good points against the likes of Northampton and Stockport, who are up there. They're a team that often delivers, and this leg is going to be crucial. For Bradford at home this season, it has been a sea of draws. 10 draws at home this year, the joint most of any team in the division. And ultimately, it's the thing that's cost them. If they turn 4 of those into victories, they'd be celebrating automatic promotion. They do tend to score goals at home, but defensively, they've not got the best record. 23 conceded in those 23 games, and only 9 home wins, by far the least of the teams in the playoffs. For Carlisle, away from home, a lot of draws as well. And again, a very similar record. The goal difference is identical away from home to Bradford's home one, and 8 draws from 23. It is going to be so tight, this. I think of all of the 6 ties we've got, this one might be the hardest to predict, because you've got 2 teams who have drawn an identical number of games this year, which bar Walsall is the highest in the division with 16. They're both teams that have drawn a lot of games recently, and even if you look at the 2 league games they played earlier in the season, you've got a 0-0 and a 1-0, and we had 2 games that were incredibly cagey with defences on top. And if you look at the season, 43 goals conceded each, less than 1 a game. And to be fair, across League 2 this season, we've not seen the biggest scoring teams. I mean, even the top 3 only scored 61 and 62 respectively. Salford are actually the joint top scorers in the division with 72. So we've not seen anyone blitzing defences. We've not seen any team with that intense attacking quality. And these 2 teams, for me, the same points total, very similar goal difference, and exactly the same record over the season of 20 wins, 16 draws, 10 defeats. This is the hardest one to predict by a mile. It's going to be tense for the 2 fan bases. I feel it's going to come down to this leg. If Bradford can win the home game in front of a huge crowd, a huge expectant fan base, it could go either way. The players could crumble under that pressure. If they can win the home leg, they'll have such confidence that you probably then wouldn't back against them in the entire playoffs. But Carlisle's always a tough away trip. This first leg is going to be horrid to predict. And you know what? I'm going to bring it down to League 2. My Championship's favourite scoreline prediction of 1 goal apiece. I can't see another score in this game other than maybe 0-0. I'm going to go for goals because we want entertainment. So for me, it's going to be the same scoreline for these 2 sides as they had on the final day of the season. Bradford City 1, Carlisle 1, and that will leave it perfectly poised for the second leg next weekend. So let's have a quick recap of what I predicted for these 2 League 2 playoff fixtures. Salford versus Stockport, I'm going for a comfortable away win, but again, we look at Salford's away record, that will not mean tie over. I've gone for 3-1 to Stockport, and Bradford Carlisle, I just can't separate. Of course, it's probably going to come down to mentality, which side has an off night, which side feels the pressure more. But for me, it's 1-1 all day. It's got to be a draw, and I think this will be the most tense of the playoff ties. 4-0 one way incoming, I'm sure. But let me know your predictions for these weekend playoffs as well. Down in the comments below, get your say, get your predictions in. If you beat my score, you will get a shout out in a recap, which will be ahead of the second leg of these playoffs next weekend. As I mentioned earlier, we've already had 3 playoff specials this week for League One, the Championship and the National League Final as well. They're all up in the eye above. If you did enjoy this episode, please do put a thumbs up on it. And if you want to stay up to date with the rest of the hectic schedule this month, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. A massive thank you to our brand partners HelloFresh UK and NordVPN. Links to both of those in the description below. And thank you to you guys as always for watching. Your support makes a massive difference. And we'll see you back here about the same time next week with all eyes on the second leg of these ties.